All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service, and to kickstart our conversation, which is on flood and food security, let's listen into this background put together by our correspondent, Victor Azu.
Call the 2F factor: food, flood, and food security, on a day the world is commemorating World Food Day. Let me quickly introduce our guest, and we have quite a number of distinguished guests here in the studio this morning. Mr. Fred Kafero is the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, United Nations representative in Nigeria, and of course to ECOWAS. He also joins us live here in the studio. Thank you very much, Mr. Kafero, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we have a familiar face, Mr. Clement Nze. He's the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, DG. DG, thank you very much for joining us once again to the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here again.
And seated by his side is Abdullahi Abubakar, Director, Mechanization, Federal Department of Agriculture, Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development here in Abuja. Our gratitude to you for joining us also.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, other guests who are here with us in Abuja would like to welcome the Secretary to the Niger State Government, Ahmed Matane. Ahmed Matane, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
It's equally a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, and then we also have joining us from one of our studios here also in Abuja, Lasana Wane, UN Women Deputy Country Representative in Nigeria. Of course, he's a man. Lasana, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Good morning. Pleasure to be with you.
And then joining us via Zoom for this conversation, we would like to welcome the Executive Governor of Nasarawa State, His Excellency Engineer Abdullahi Sule. Your Excellency, delighted to have you with us again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Morning. Thank you very much.
All right. So, gentlemen, once again, a pleasure to have you with us. Since it's flood and food security with other matters arising, let's begin with Engineer Clem Nze, who is the Director General of NISA, that's the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency. Engineer Nze, we've had you a number of times this year in our studios to discuss flood outlook, flood prediction, and indeed when the impact started. What is the story so far with regard to flooding? Is it an emergency status that we have climbed to in a number of cases, or we are weathering the floods, if so to speak?
Okay, once again, thank you for having me. Earlier in the year, we made the prediction about flooding incidents across the country. We listed local government areas that are likely to be highly impacted, and those that may have lesser severity of flooding. As of today, we have recorded more than 382 local government areas across all the 36 states in Nigeria, including the FCT, that have been heavily impacted. But as early as June, a flood incident began in Nigeria, as against the usual July, August, September, part of October. It began quite early this year, and what we witnessed have been quite devastating. Well, while the flooding is receding, starting from the northern part of the country, the impact in those states of Nigeria, those states in the north, are still quite alarming. And for the river flooding that commenced late August, starting from Kebbi State, that's through River Niger, it is still moving down to the far south, so that the magnitude witnessed in Kebbi State, Niger, Kwara, then Kogi, the impact is still moving down. We are not yet out of the flooding, especially that caused by river flooding. And in the southern part of Nigeria, where the rainfall is expected to cease sometime in December, both river flooding, urban flooding, coastal flooding are still being expected and are still taking place. We are not yet out of the flooding issue in certain parts of Nigeria.
Okay, just staying with you, DJ, specifically, since we have two states here with us this morning, Niger and Nasarawa, specifically to them, in terms of precipitation of the flood, what is the fate? How severe might it be for them?
It may not be worse than what has happened so far. Like I mentioned, the rainfall is receding, starting from the northern part of the country down south. For Niger, Nasarawa, the flooding is still taking place because River Niger, the dams have not closed their gates. Releases are still taking place. Even though upstream in Niamey, the flood level has come down to normal. It's less than 5 meters. It's about 5 meters or so as of today. As against over 7 meters we witnessed sometime in September. So those states might still be having some measure of flooding because the flooding level, the river level is receding, and it has to pass through those areas before going down certain part of Nigeria.
Okay, Engineer, thank you very much. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. We have the Secretary to the State Government of Niger here with us in the studios, Ahmed Matane. Tell us, how hit has Niger State been with this year's flood and flooding?
Well, thank you very much. For Niger State, this is the worst that we have ever experienced in the last 10 years as regards flooding. As you do know that Niger State is blessed with major rivers and their tributaries, and that's why we have the three major hydroelectric dams, the Java Dam and the Kayenji Dam, and of course Shiroro. And of course all of them this year have overflown, and of course the communities downstream suffered devastating effect of floods. I would tell you that I had been on water to really do assessment for more than 10 hours with my team. And then what we saw is really, heart-rending, because you have River Niger course. Most of the communities, on the River Niger had actually completely got submerged. Now, off River Niger, you go to 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, all water. And all the farmlands now have actually been, submerged. That's for River Niger. But you also have River Kaduna. River Kaduna downstream of Shiroro, most of the communities there have also been, devastated. Their farmlands, overflown. And of course, where River Kaduna joins River Niger, Moregi area, again, the whole of those communities, have, been affected. As of today, we have a rough estimate of over 116,000, households, that have been completely displaced. And we have close to, 900,000 hectares, of farmlands, that have been completely submerged. Now, usually these riverine communities where, have is majorly produced, sugarcane, and of course maize. And all of these, have really been lost, to these floods. A rough estimate of over 4 billion naira, of what is lost, in terms of value of crops, has, been estimated. And like the DG, has said, it seems that it's not going away. We thought, by now, the waters, will begin to recede. But unfortunately, it is still where it is. And of course, most of these communities that have been affected have lost their houses because of the weak nature of the usual, community settlements that we have. When water remains, for months, you find that, it weakens, most of these buildings, and they begin to collapse. We have lost bridges, and some, some assets, livestock. But we are lucky that, we have not lost many lives, as had been experienced in the past. But in terms of economic value, it's been very, very devastating.
Thank you, SSG to Niger State. Let's also bring in His Excellency, the Governor of Nasarawa State Engineer, Abdullahi Sule. What is your experience, Your Excellency? Is the situation such that The state purse has been severely affected.
Yes, thank you very much. I think ours is totally in line with what the gentleman from Niger has mentioned. If you observe, recently you saw me in the Asian town of Nasarawa, where over 200 houses were actually submerged. You know, so like he said, I think I would like us to look at it from this point of view. What is actually causing this flooding? Is it just the rains that is causing it? Like he mentioned, you have on River Niger 3 major dams and then the hydro power generation. And every time that you have those dams filled up, they release the water, and that causes lots of more flooding. That is one of the causes. You know, he mentioned about Kainji, Shiroro Dam, and the rest of that usually fill. So that is one problem. The next problem we have mainly is the fact that most of our own people also, during the planning of housing, we build houses very, very close to the river line on the waterways. And in Nasarawa town, where over 200 houses were submerged, that was the major cause of the problem. You know, because the water must find its level, it must go somewhere. So most of those houses were submerged because a lot of them were really on the water line. That's part of the problem that we had. Now, just coincidentally, yesterday I was in Tunga. Tunga is in our local government areas. It's on the back of River Benue. And to give you an idea, you know, I went to one of the major, we're talking about food security. I went to one of the major agri projects we have in the country. That is the Dangote sugar factory that is going to take place, plantation that is going to take place in Tunga, where about 68,000 of hectares are going to be harvested. Now, with that area, I went to the pump station. At the pump station, to give you an idea, at the pump station, they had to stop working because the water level, the draft, was 13 meters. To give you an idea what 13 meters is, apart from where we are discharging most of the ships is usually between 11 and 12 meters. So you can imagine an area where you don't have facilities, you don't have platforms, and the water level already 13 meters. So now what caused the one, I understand the one of Niger is caused by that. Now, how about the one of Benue River that is usually always flooded also? Again, you go back to similar problems because every time they release water from the dams in Cameroon, you know, you have these kind of problems. So this is also another issue. So we have to understand, because we can't be talking about flooding every year without solving the problems. We have to look at the causes of these problems. You know, he mentioned about like River Kaduna, which is similar to like the river that we have. And most of the time, these rivers don't flow easily and they get flooded. Why? Because once the major rivers, River Niger and River Benue, are flooded, then the rivers cannot fit into that. At the end of the day, the water now comes the other direction and then gets flooded. These are the kinds of problems that we are facing. And I think as a nation, even though, you know, take Lagos for instance, you know, in Lagos we get lots of flooding while I was living in Lagos. Apapa always problems in Apapa. Again, it's similar problem. You know, the drainages are usually sometimes filled up with a lot of waste, you know, by residents around the areas, and the water doesn't flow. So instead now the water flows into people's houses. You know, these are all part of the town planning problem. So we have to look at our town planning and then look at the discharge of the water into the rivers. Thank you very much.
All right, Your Excellency, thank you. You've raised a pertinent issue, and we still have Engineer Clement here with us in the studios. In his previous appearances on Good Morning Nigeria, he had actually answered some of these questions. But today, it will also be useful for him to do a recap as to why we are having this phenomenon of river flooding. You just mentioned Apapa, which of course is referred to as urban flooding. But Engineer Nze, you are the expert. Speak to this more.
Okay, thank you. There are basically, for us here in Nigeria, 3 types of flooding we experience annually. It often commences with urban flooding, which is occasioned by blockage of drainages during local rainfall in some catchments. For instance, Abuja. when it rains in Abuja, because most places are paved, no infiltration, no amount of, reasonable amount of infiltration. So you have so much overland flow, runoff. And when there are no adequate drainages or non-existent drainages, that will generate flooding, urban flooding. For the coastal areas, we know the type of flood. That's the second one, coastal flooding, for the states that are contiguous to the ocean. Now, when it comes to river flooding in Nigeria, there are two transboundary rivers, rivers Niger and Benue. Now, it is outside our own making. The river Niger takes its course from Futazalon Highlands in Guinea, traversing about 4,200 kilometers before emptying into the Atlantic Ocean in Nigeria. Before then, all the countries that are, about 7 of them on the river Niger axis, Guinea, Mali, Niger, Benin Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, and Burkina Faso, then Nigeria. In the basin, what we call Niger Basin, whatever happens in all those countries must drain down to Nigeria. And then on the river Benue axis, you have Cameroon and Chad, all come down to Nigeria. Now, it is not always a release of water from the dams, for instance, in Cameroon, that will cause flooding on the river Benue. Nigeria doesn't have a dam on the river Benue axis. There are so many tributaries of the river Benue within Nigeria and also downstream of the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon that discharge into the river Benue, that have the capacity, the potency to get river Benue, flooded, the capacity to overwhelm the current capacity of the channels. Like this year so far, no release of water yet from Lagdo Dam, but river Benue is swelling because of the rainfall within Nigeria and downstream also of Lagdo Dam inside Cameroon. That the tributaries of river Benue, Kasenala, Donga, Mayokebi, Faro, named quite a lot of them, Gongola, that flow into river Benue, that cause river Benue to swell and then flood the environment down to Lokoja, even like His Excellency mentioned, in Nasarawa State. So that is the third leg of flooding. Like what happened in Kebbi State, it was because of the flood that occurred in Niamey before coming down to Nigeria. Niamey was flooded. It had never happened so before, over 7-meter height in the Ariko station. Likewise, Malanville in Benin Republic, about 40 kilometers before River Niger enters into Nigeria, within Benin Republic. So this is river flooding. We gave warning ahead of time, and we have a close relationship with the countries within the River Niger wing, so that if anything is happening there, we are informed ahead of time. But we have a little challenge with Cameroon side, that's the River Benue.
All right, DJ, thank you. And since we're dealing with, as I said, the F factors, flood and food security, let's also relate the issue of flood with food as I take my question to the FAO UN rep in Nigeria and to ECOWAS. First of all, Mr. Kafero, let me congratulate the FAO on its 75th anniversary and also appreciate over 4 decades of FAO support to Nigeria. Even before, I know today is World Food Day. It's a period that FAO says it's an exceptional moment for countries on account of COVID-19. But even before COVID-19, we've had to deal with, as we must have heard, issues of flood, impacting on our food security and all that. What has been your assessment of what had happened, even before COVID-19 in terms of food security for us?
Thank you so much. First and foremost, let me appreciate the invitation to be here. This is my first time, but it's not the last time. I'll be coming over here, and also to recognize the farmers out there, because this is an important day for everyone. The World Food Day is a day in which we appreciate the work of all those who are involved in production of food. but more importantly to galvanize action towards ensuring sustainable food security and nutrition. Let me say in relation to the topic, and this is very important because the theme for this year's World Food Day is looking at grow, nourish, sustain. That sustain is very important from what we're talking about, that we can continuously have food security over the years. But it has another aspect which says together the actions we take today are our future tomorrow. So our actions are very important, and I heard the other panelists talking about the importance of taking action. If we don't take action, we cannot be able to overcome our issues. Now, back to the issue that we're talking about, I think that we all recognize the fact that there is increasing change in climate. This is a global issue, and it's not only for Nigeria, it's everywhere. When we talk about floods, as you say, they're not only here, they're also in countries that are neighboring us. And therefore, the kinds of actions that we need to take go beyond just Nigeria, because we have all these cross-boundary resources that, in fact, impact on all of us. But having said that, FAO and the World Meteorological Organization have been, in fact, just recently released a publication that was showing over the years the kinds of incidences that we have had, especially in the area of flooding. And it's very clear that the frequency is increasing, but also the intensity. And unfortunately, the biggest impact is on all those smallholder farmers out there in rural areas. Those are the ones that are impacted most. So the kinds of actions that we as the UN generally, but also as a global community are looking at is how do we ensure early warning for our people. And I'm glad that the DG for meteorology is here, because early warning is very important to inform early action. The issue of flooding is, besides impacting on agriculture, also impacts on people's livelihoods, on people's health, but on the environment as well. And I've had the actions that have been taken in this country, which I really appreciate. But I think that we need to broaden also our scope into the way we manage the environment, because quite often you find that I mean, many countries have floods, but the way the floods impact on them is not the same way they impact on others, largely because of the way they manage the environment. So I think the importance of science here is very important. Research, working with research is key. The research institutions, we have very strong research institutions in this country that can give us advice on the type of crops, for example, that can be grown in a situation like this. I mean, people's farms were washed away. So what happens if they have to get back on the feet? We need them to plant crops that can actually tolerate the environment in which now they find themselves. And that's research for you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kafari. Just before we bring in the other guys, still on the commemorative day for both the organization and World Food Day, tell us, is the world any more hungry today than it had ever been at any time in human history? And if so, what are the factors?
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, the World Food Day is not an FAO day. It's actually a day for the entire United Nations, including all of us. But having said that, the world, as you ask, we have, well, I'll tell you that in last year, the FAO and the Africa Union released a report on the state of undernourishment on the continent. And at that time, it was just beginning of last year, we had 256 million people in Africa still suffering from undernourishment. So in other words, people who are hungry. Then, of course, now we have new factors that relate to COVID. At that time, the drivers for that were largely to do with the conflicts that we have, to do with the weather patterns that we have just been talking about, floods, prolonged droughts, and all that, but also the economic downturn that globally impacted on the continent. Now, of course, with the COVID and its negative impacts that we have seen also effects everywhere, including in this country, you know, with spike of prices, with the inability for people to meaningfully produce, but also to trade and market their produce. Definitely the numbers are rising, and we're worried about that because of the new factor now that COVID brought in.
Okay, I'd just like to, in terms of, specifically with Nigeria, how do you rate the issue of hunger? Are we making progress, you know, within the context of the SDGs, meeting the ending hunger and of course achieving food security?
There's no country in Africa that is making progress with regard to ending hunger. Actually, the report that we released clearly showed that we are off track with regard to realizing the zero hunger goal. And that was before COVID. And with COVID, naturally, you would expect that, we need to double our efforts. But we can do that. We can do that with commitment. We can do that with the actions of everyone.
Give us an insight how bad it is, really.
Well, I talked about the numbers that we have, because for us we raise global reports, but we also have specific regional reports. In Nigeria, there is a process that actually the government is involved with other stakeholders, including the UN, in terms of assessing the number of people who are hungry. For now, that process is largely done for the northern states and the northeast. The northeast, particularly because of its specific context, which is quite challenging given the insurgency. Now, the last one that was done before COVID in the Bay States, now here I'm talking about the northeast, showed initially that we had 3.7 million people who are hungry in the Bay States. And after COVID, an additional 600,000 people were added on. So making a total of 4.3 million who really required assistance with food. Now that's just the Bay State.
Bay States will be Borno,
Adamawa, and Yobe. Yobe.
Okay.
Yobe.
All right, thank you. We'll return to you, FAO rep in Nigeria. Let's bring in now the Director of Mechanization and the Federal Minister of Agric and Rural Development, that's Abdullahi Abubakar. Abdullahi, you've been listening, of course, to the guests outlining what the issues are with regard to flood and the points just made, also the numbers ticked off by the FAO rep with regard to dealing with food sufficiency and therefore undernourishment. What is the outlook from the perspective of the Federal Minister of Agriculture in terms this year, for instance, the impact of flood and flooding and general food security situation?
Thank you very much. Yeah, really the flooding has come as a natural disaster. It's unexpected, just like the COVID-19. But what the ministry is trying to do, since it has come, we are trying to find solution. How do we sustain or at least increase the production of our crops? So just as the FAO rep has rightly said, we have our researchers who are into researching for early maturing varieties of crops that can be planted within a short time. It can mature. Like now, the Honorable Minister has gone all the flood areas, and we have ascertained that when the water is receding, there are crops that can be planted with the moisture level of that flooding. Those crops can even mature, so that at least they will gain back what they have lost in the flood. Again, it is another understanding that we cannot do without all year round agricultural production, so that we can augment what we might have lost due to the flooding. So there is a very gigantic plan for dry season farming, so that as soon as the rain stops, there are people who are in an area that they can do dry season farming with the water that has receded, or the water bodies that are there, because we have a lot of water bodies in this country that are left unutilized. So I think it is the intention of the ministry now that we have to collaborate with the Federal Ministry of Water Resources, so that those water bodies can be utilized for irrigation during the dry season, so that we can at least maintain that quantum of production that we are targeting. And it is also very clear that you have to work on availability and affordability for you to be food secured. So if it is not available, it becomes a problem. If it is available and is not affordable, it's still another problem. But definitely with the economics, we know if the production is high, then it will be available and it can be affordable, because the opportunity cost will be there for you to buy, and it is available and it will be affordable for you in the long run. So the measures are there. We are just waiting for the water to recede, and then people can start planting on that particular flooded area. With the moisture level, these crops are going to grow, and they will be able to harvest them before even the dry season come in squarely. Immediately the dry season has set in, that is, the moisture content has gone down, then you can do your supplementary irrigation, because the water bodies are there. In fact, the ministry has acquired a lot of water pumps that can be distributed to farmers in those flood-prone areas, so that they can use it to irrigate their farms. I think with this measure, it will contain the issue of food insecurity.
Thank you. Let's bring in Mr. Lassana Wane, UN Women Deputy Country Representative in Nigeria. Thank you for being with us. Let's quickly look at the issue of women, of course, especially here in our country, in the rural areas. They constitute a major percentage of smallholder farmers. How have they been impacted by flood and food security issues?
Thank you very much. I'm very much pleased to have joined the team in this discussion this morning. Just to mention that yesterday we actually celebrated the International Day of the Rural Woman, and today is the World Food Day. Both days are related, and we start with the recognition of a fact of the statistics you just mentioned, that rural women, or women generally, make the bulk of what the smallholder farmers are in much of sub-Saharan Africa and in Nigeria specifically. If you look at the equation of food security in Nigeria, the critical players are the rural women, who form the majority of the smallholder farmers. They contribute significantly to production activities. At least every 4 out of 5 women in rural Nigeria is engaged in some form of food production or food processing activities. They also form the bulk of the people who trade in food. But yet they face the vast difficulty in that agricultural value chain, in the food value chain. When we talk about flood, for instance, the fundamental thing has to do with climate change. So climate change impacts more on women than their male folks. Now, because they have limited resources, when there is flood, their crops are wiped off. They have little access to irrigation facilities. So the other part of climate change, for instance, if there are dry spells, they don't have access to water. So the situation impacts more significantly on women than other actors, and because of their critical role in production of crops, in processing of crops, and other agricultural products, the overall impact is reduction of food security in the country. Beyond that, in as much as women constitute the bulk of farmers, the food producers in the country, when there is food insecurity, they are also the most impacted because their production areas are smaller, the level of their productivity are lower because they have limited access to productive resources. When you look at access to land, for instance, I've gone to various areas in this country. Not long ago, I was in Benue State. The most productive lands are not being cultivated by women. The irrigated plots are all owned by men. So when I was in Ebonyi about 3 weeks ago, women were already facing flood situation. And earlier before that time, there were dry spells and they could not irrigate their crops. However, the surrounding plots that were owned by men were all being cultivated, is irrigated, etc., etc. So it is really important that women are empowered in the agri-food value chain because they make the bulk of the population in that value chain. And that empowerment has to do with a number of right issues: their land rights, rights to other productive resources, rights to mechanization, rights to water. They are not part of the water governance systems, even in irrigation facilities. So holistically, food security is very much the responsibility of women. Some few years ago, we did a research on gender gaps in the agricultural value chains. So we realized that in 6 African countries, that translates into billions of dollars that is lost simply because women are not given the same right and opportunity as men in the agricultural value chains.
All right, thank you very much, Lasana, for your comment there. I will return to you. Let's go over once again to the Executive Governor of Nasarawa State, Engineer Abdullahi Sule. Your Excellency, well, you listened to the explanation by the DG of the Hydrological Services with regard to the causative factors and mechanisms of flooding around the country. But one of just 2 issues also, one raised by the Director from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. One, it has to do with subnational utilization of information from federal agencies, say either NIMET or more particularly in this case the Hydrological Services Agency. Because I recall, as I said, Engineer Nse had been with us on more than 2 or 3 occasions on Good Morning Nigeria. If plus today, that would be about the 4th time that he's appearing. There's some frustration that some state governments are not so enthusiastic in latching on to the information provided by NISA. And therefore, it's when things get out of hand that you hear their voices loudest crying and screaming that they have a state of emergency. What is it that states can do more readily to take their bearing, as it were, from this information being provided free of charge by federal agencies? That's one leg. Abubakar of Federal Ministry of Agri also talks about more efficient utilization of water bodies, which is irrigation. Now, the Honorable Minister of Water Resources, again, our regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, just as recently as yesterday he was here, one of the challenges that the Federal Ministry of Water Resources faces is that states are not following up with their own irrigation schemes. It looks like everything must come from the federal government. How can we tackle these issues, assuming you consider them to be pertinent?
Thank you very much for the questions. I think it's unfair to the state to say they are not following, because the states are the ones local, they are the ones with the people, and they are the ones that understand the pains of the people. So how on earth will the state, with any state, put its own people on the line and in danger? What happens is the area of communication sometimes between some of these federal agencies and the state. Let us talk the issue of flooding, for instance. When the issue of flooding came up, let me talk about Nasarawa specifically. We have a director in charge of emergency situations. We funded campaigns in every area where the certain local governments were identified that these local government areas were going to be flooded. So we had to send some kind of awareness programs, sensitization programs. And they went around, and they went to Nasarawa, they went to Kokona. I remember I personally attended the one in Kokona, that they were doing. I personally attended the one of Nasarawa town that they were attending. So these are the kind of things. And in most cases, the federal agencies are busy in other places. They don't attend some of these events themselves. I mean, federal, state, we are all the same and we are working for the same people. So just like the states are carrying out this awareness and sensitization, the federal also has a responsibility to the same people. They can carry out the same, but it's not a blame game that state is not carrying out this, is not carrying out that. It's not the case. We fund some of these operations, we receive the information, and we carry out sensitization in all these other areas to do that. Now, let us take the area again that you mentioned from the Federal Minister of Agriculture. We meet with this Minister of Agriculture regularly, most of the times. In fact, our chairman of the Governors Forum, the governor of Ekiti State, invites them every month. We invite some of these agencies, some of the development partners, to come and brief us about what they are doing and to see how we can buy into them and to see how we can practice them. I will tell you, talking of agriculture specifically, I have not seen in the past where governors are more interested in agriculture, either commercial agriculture or small-scale farming, more than I have seen recently. One, because of the IGR of most of the states. A lot of the states, some of the states that you may think will have difficulty on agriculture, like Cross River, like Benue and the rest of that, you will see how interested they are. In fact, the chairman of the NLTP, that is the National Livestock Transformation Project, is even the governor of Benue. That is a pure agricultural area. And even though the 3 states that have been identified from the beginning are in the north, but he is the chairman and he is driving it with all sense of interest. So a lot of these agencies, and sometimes I think it depends on who is speaking for the ministries. I think I speak with the minister nearly regularly. Just yesterday we spoke about where we are going to go in certain areas of our own agriculture. So I think it depends on who you talk to. It depends on who you are interviewing. It depends on that. So we get different information from different kind of people. But I don't think it is fair to say that the states are not taking some of these issues regularly. The Minister of Water Resources, is actually in the process, for instance, of building a dam for Nasarawa State. I am constantly, directly, not even my commissioner, I am the one constantly on the line with him to ensure that we do that, to reduce some of the hardship, provide irrigation, provide the hydro, for that area completely. We are talking with the central bank, for instance, about using our dam to provide small-scale farming. We talk to the Ministry of Agriculture, and they are the ones providing the small-scale farming in some of these areas, like the Doma Dam and the rest of that. So I don't know which states in particular. Maybe sometime when they say that, we need to specify what states are they having difficulties with, and then the Governors Forum will be more than happy to sit with them and understand that and address them, because the governors are worried and concerned, and they are devoted to their people. I believe that some of these agencies are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I would also like the Secretary to the Niger State Government to also take that issue, because the FAO rep here, UN rep here, spoke about the need for us to broaden our actions with regards to early warnings. And I know the case of Niger is, yes, it's critical, because it's a yearly thing. The Kainji Dam would always release water. You would always, the river Kaduna would always overflow. And I know areas in the west and east of Niger are very prone to flooding. So how have you taken advantage of the early warning predictions coming from NISA and NIMET, to broaden your actions?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Let me respond quickly to some of the major issues, and really to say that states have been proactive to deal with this situation. We are very conscious of NIMET early warning, and like the governor of His Excellency the Governor of Nasarawa said, we also sensitize our people, mobilize them towards them to respond to likely effects of flooding. But there are two ways to it. Some of these communities have cultural affinity to their ancestral lands and all of this, so they will not want to completely vacate. For those we have identified that, because they're prone to annual flooding, we want to take them to higher grounds. Now, taking them to higher grounds in permanent resettlement areas require money. In fact, for Niger, we have identified about 3-4 of these communities. Each one of them will spend no less than 5 to 10 billion naira to resettle them. And then it becomes capital intensive. For their farmlands, they believe that because of the nature of their farmlands, they want to retain them. And so what we have seen this year is to say that all the farmlands have been taken over, not directly again affecting the communities themselves. They've been able to survive, but their farmlands have gone. Now, I also want to look at we do not, as a country, begin to give palliatives every year. And this is the dimension that the Federal Minister of Agriculture need to align with the states. It's not just when the floods happen and then they recede and then you go and give them support. No. What are the permanent solutions? And for me, I see these flood waters as a major asset. Why can't we harvest this water for greater economic impact for these communities?
What is stopping the sub-governments from doing that?
Yeah, but it's a lot of money. Now, let me also give you a permanent solution, because Nigeria is also not, does not have lack of ideas. We have the HAPADEC. The HAPADEC, was the Hydropower Producing Areas Development Commission. We have, really extensively looked at what are the requirements for these communities, to really, deal with the issue of annual flooding, deal with the permanent settlement of these communities, and of course for the greater prosperity for these communities. But 10 years after the HAPADEC bill, nothing has been done. And we have realized that, for major, states that are prone to this annual, flooding, they need to really, be supported so that we can have permanent solutions. We're talking about Kebbi, we're talking about Niger State, we're talking of Kwara, Kogi, and part of Plateau. And then once we are able to deal with this, we do not wait, until the floods come. In fact, we can even maximize, the benefits of the floods. Because many of these farmers, the communities, are farmers and fishermen. And then they utilize, the natural resource, for them to access their livelihoods. So we need to have more permanent solution, do things differently. Let's not look at it as an annual thing. Let's have a permanent solution, to this. The states have limitations. For Niger, we have 3, age swords. Most of the communities have suffered from, act of banditry and all of this. They have left their homelands, the little time they had to farm, now, floods have taken over. 2, of course, it becomes annual. COVID was there. Many of them have just managed, to survive out of it. And again, floods, came in and wiped out whatever they have left or the little they have done. And of course, and if we continue like this, we cannot stop these dams from, opening, their spillways, when the water gets, into the dams and overflowing. So this is something that we need to do, as a permanent solution. The HAPADEC Development Commission needs to be, activated so that these states, can have access, to some good solutions. Research should be part of it. Livelihoods in the development framework should be part of it. And of course, permanent settlements, for those who are prone, or who are on the lower grounds, can also be, resolved. And I believe that, once we do that, we'll come to an end, as far as, annual floodings and if
that will be doubtful. The latter part of the comment you just made, SSG, it will be doubtful. And I'm happy that the experts are still here with us in the studios. And I'll tell you why. Because as I said, Good Morning Nigeria has engaged this subject matter on a yearly basis. And this year, of course, the frequency of our engagement of the subject has been higher than normal. So in the management of large water body systems, for instance, our dams, we know that there's a problem of siltation. But the experts have also indicated that if the dams were utilized more efficiently for irrigation, then when the floods are coming like this, the rains and floods are coming, the dams will be in a better position to impound more water before they start overflowing, before their spillways are left open. I want to bring in Abdullahi Abubakar again to speak to this. And I'm sure, of course, Engineer Clement is also there. What is the challenge? You listen to His Excellency, the Executive Governor. Why is it that we still have this problem ongoing? Is it the federal government that is supposed to be building irrigation canals and all of those for the subnational entities?
Well, you see, it is under the purview of the Federal Ministry of Water Resources to have large irrigation dams they can put up the infrastructure for people to utilize it. The Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development are into the medium and small irrigation schemes. That is ongoing because but you need to have, like we say, the federal government doesn't have land. This land resides in the states, and in all these states, including FCT, there is a full-fledged office headed by a director, a state director from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, who is virtually representing the Honorable Minister at the state level. If there is any need for a particular state to utilize an irrigation, a water body that needs irrigation facilities, we will look at it. If it is a larger irrigation scheme, we can direct them to the Federal Ministry of Water Resources. If it is a medium or small, the Ministry of Agriculture will see how we can collaborate with the state and set up the irrigation scheme so that the farmers around that place can utilize it. And I'm aware also, within our purview, we buy some of this irrigation equipment, sell it at almost 75% subsidy to farmers. Individually, they can come, or as cooperative, they can come and buy. We can send the technical expert to assist them, install them, and they make use of it. And this is something that needs the cooperation of the state. Even the states, some of them used to buy these water pumps so that they can distribute to farmers. But if the state cannot come, it will be difficult. We go to the state because it's not free. We are just selling it as subsidy. So unless the state requests for it, then they will get. But if we take it to the state, they will think it is a national cake, which we don't want to. But we have been telling our staff at the state level, tell people that you have this thing, they can route their application through you, you can forward it to the headquarters. Sometimes we even carry some of this irrigation equipment and dump it in the state level so that they don't have to have rigors of coming to Abuja to buy this thing, so that they can buy it at that level. That is why it was very clear, the minister, when he saw this flooding, he now said, all the water pumps we have, let's keep them. I don't know whether he intends to give them free or at least to now sell them to the farmers that have been caught under this flooding, so that they can use it for supplementary irrigation. But I believe with the water bodies we have in the state can utilize that water to irrigate their farms during dry season, which will increase the productivity of farmers, and it will also increase the yield, because under irrigation you have twice the yield of your crop, provided you have done the good agricultural practices. So it is very important that the states key into that, let them see how they can increase their productivity of their farmers. Because if you don't do it, it will be difficult for the federal government to carry itself, go there. In fact, until you start working on a particular farm, before you will be told that that farm is for some other things. So it is important for the state to clearly demarcate, if possible, an area that is very close to a water source that they can use for irrigation for all year round farming.
All right, Director, thank you. Gentlemen, let's quickly go on a short break. We'll come back shortly and continue with our conversation. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria.
A new edition of TV Guide is out, featuring great personalities from all walks of life. Expository interview with a young TV presenter who shows passion on what she does, Morayo Afolabi Brown of TVC. Pick a copy of this compendium of mind-blowing stories and get abreast with issues as regards media convergence, leadership, health, star profiles, star programs, fashion, sports, human angle stories, and lots more. Meet some media professionals within our space who have paid their dues in no small ways. TV Guide, very incisive, very educative and compelling. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service. We're just talking about the flooding situation in the country. The FAO rep in Nigeria, Mr. Fred Kafero. Of course, you've listened to the comments by our guests. We know that there are other significant factors in the food security matrix in the country. You mentioned COVID-19. I sometimes wonder whether COVID-19 hasn't just become another whipping boy. Everybody go, you say, oh, it's COVID, oh, it's COVID. I mean, once humanity defeats this COVID, we'll have to find something else to do. But in terms of our food security going forward, you had the Honorable Minister of Agric here sometime not too long ago, and he did say that we're going to overcome, current challenges. But what is the outlook from the FAO perspective? What is it that we need to do? We know that the Northeast, which was the base location for your study, it continues to have incidents of terror, but nationwide, and therefore to ramp up our food security, what would you like to see done?
Thank you so much. I think first of all, this is a very good discussion that we are having, especially on this day. For us, that's the whole essence of commemorating this day, because on one hand, we reflect on our actions and where we are. So, I mean, from what I have heard, it's very clear that where we are now is a consequence of the actions that we have taken in the past, or the inaction we haven't done. So it's a good discussion. Having said that, I think the issue that we in FAO have been talking about a lot with regard to strengthening food security and nutrition has to do with how we also increase the productivity in agriculture. And that is for crops, that is for fisheries, and also for livestock. Largely because there is a lot of, especially in this country, there's a lot of potential to actually increase productivity in terms of, one, the kinds of inputs that we provide for agriculture, whether it's improved seeds, whether it's fertilizer, whether it's the practices, the management practices that the farmers undertake. This needs to be improved, and it's happening. I'm not saying that's not happening, but we can do better if we are really able to improve productivity in the sector, to address the food security needs of the population in this country, but also to contribute to the economy, because with increased productivity you should be able to attract markets and export. So that is key. The other thing also is how we increase the variety in what we produce and what we eat. Quite often there is a lot of emphasis in producing cereals and grains, and less emphasis also on those nutritious foods that balance with the cereals. Talking about legume, talking about vegetables, talking about fruits. This country has it all, but if you are to nourish a body and have a healthy population, you need to have balanced and healthy diets. And for us, that diversity is very, very important. And of course, I always say that there's a lot of emphasis in this country with regard to crops, but less emphasis on issues of fisheries, which for me, I see with all these water bodies in the country, there's a lot of resource that we can tap to be able, both for food security, nutrition, but also incomes, including export of fish, both inland but also marine fish. And livestock is a key resource in this country. We rarely talk about it, but it's very, very important also to pop up the economy.
What does the FAO see in terms of improving yield and productivity? This government has taken quite a number of policies, or enunciated a number of policies and programs to drive the agri diversification. And the president himself has come out to, admonish farmers to grow what we eat and for us to eat what we grow. How does the FAO, see that playing out?
First of all, I think it's very important to recognize the capacities in this country to actually do things. Nigeria is known for its research prowess. We have researchers in this country and research bodies that actually play a key role if you're talking about increasing productivity. And they have that ability to do it. As far as I've been here 3 months, but as far as I understand, that there's quite a lot that the research body is doing in this country. But also the private sector, because the private sector brings in technology that is actually important in changing the course of agriculture in any situation. So involving private sector, linking with the research, for us is very important, and I've started making my own visits to some of these partners, to see how we can work. And I think with that, it's very possible that productivity can be increased, yields can increase, and we can feed our people in the country with what we grow.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kafero. Once again, Engineer Nze, let's bring you in here. The point has been underscored by experts that Nigeria doesn't have a water problem, strictly speaking, but it's just the management that is the issue. And since we are on floods and flooding, are we managing our floods and flooding well for purposes of enhancing our food security?
But that has been a major issue. I have participated in several fora where negotiations took place over the Transboundary rivers. That is what we call in that debate threshold. For instance, Guinea. Nigeria was said that Guinea shouldn't take more than 15% of the water of the Niger passing through your territory. Likewise, Mali, you shouldn't take more than 15%. That was Nigeria's argument. In that order, so that you don't shortchange downstream countries, especially Nigeria that is at the bottom. Now the argument has been the other countries. Argument they place is this: Nigeria, the ones we leave to come to your side, how much of it do you use? To the point on that day we were defeated, as it were, 8 countries versus 1. It had to be raised to 25%. So that you can't take more than 25% of the water passing through your territory. Then on the aggregate, we lose over 200 billion cubic meters of fresh water annually to the Atlantic Ocean. This is a very big resource that, if managed well, Nigeria will blossom in various sectors. Water is key. Now, look at water as a resource. Why do states through which this rivers Niger and Benue traverse allow the water to waste annually? Is there anything that could be done to detain this water reasonably within the territories they pass in Nigeria? That's the crux of the matter. And shortly after about 3-4 months, we are back to the dry season. And again, under the Federal Ministry of Water Resources, so huge amount of water is detained in our reservoirs, in our dams. And there is a provision through one of our agencies in the ministry that both private individuals and the state governments can take water at a cost for whatever purpose. They will be licensed to use those water instead of allowing them to remain there. In some areas, you see they talk about 15 billion cubic meters of water. 14 cubic meters of water lying idle. And then those of them in the health sector will tell you mosquitoes are being bred in those areas. Now, we have been advocating the issue of creating diversion canals, maybe during dry season, so that you can deepen it. Take about maybe 50 kilometers away from the bank of River Niger or Benue. Go out somewhere and create another community. Build a big reservoir in those areas. Some of us are used to, we know about Jabi Lake here.
That's what Hyperdeck should do.
It is artificial, it is artificial lake. It was constructed. Such can be replicated in several states so that instead of losing huge amount of water annually, we can detain reasonable amount of it. Each state can build as many as it can, going by its own land, land mass, availability of space, so that we can use this water detained for year-round irrigated agriculture, for recharge of the groundwater, the aquifers, so that it can, the boreholes you drill in those environments, like if you go to Life Camp, Jabi, even up to Gwarempa, the yield of boreholes have increased because of Jabi Lake that has continually recharged at the groundwater. So what we are saying is something could be done. We could have a convocation involving the states to think outside the box on how to manage this huge resource which other countries don't have. It will serve the purpose of a flood control and then year-round irrigated agriculture, recreation, and so on and so forth. It is possible.
All right, let's bring in the UN Women Rep who's joined us here, Mr. Lasana. Earlier on, you raised the issue about women being the drivers of our food security, and of course several issues that hinder them from performing this role effectively. My question will be, how can we inclusively mainstream them to be able to perform this role very well? And might there be a gender-friendly technology in view of the fact that some of the issues that you have raised may not have short-term solutions? Is there a gender-friendly technology that these women in the rural areas can be exposed to?
That the greatest agricultural resources of a country is or are the people, and you have rightly said that those people are smallholder women farmers. So my take on this is that we really have to prioritize. Yes, mainstreaming gender in agricultural investment is important and should be a significant part of the equation leading to sustainable food security for Nigeria and perhaps other countries in Africa. But let me start by saying that we have to recognize as government, as individuals, as private sector, the critical role that is being played by these smallholder farmers, and deliberately targets investment to increase their productivity at the lowest level of the agricultural chain, but also target investment along the chain in terms of also creating access and processing. So one critical entry point is that if we sit down as men and say we are mainstreaming gender, we are mainstreaming smallholder women farmers outside of the women themselves, then we might not be doing justice to those women. And many times we give oversight to some of the things that they will prioritize. Even what we are calling gender-friendly technology should not be determined by me or the directors that are here. It actually has to be determined by the women themselves who are involved in this. So what I want to say is that bring women to the table in terms of decision making at the highest level. In policy making, for instance, how much role do they play? How are they involved in allocating budgets for agricultural investment? In terms of, let's say, even irrigation management, Where are the priorities? Who determine these priorities? Who are the people who actually get positions in irrigated land to cultivate the crops? When we are investing in technology, whether it's as government or private sector, who makes this decision? Do we have women on the table to guide these processes? I think that should be a critical entry point. Let's bring women into decision-making processes. I think they know what is best for them to improve their productivity. There are so many women who have been to the universities to study agriculture and so on and so forth. But then look among decision makers, how many of them are in those decision making positions? I think we have to give these priorities. We have to give critical leadership to women in the agricultural sector, in food production, etc., etc. When we go around communities and even look at local government area chairs and so on and so forth, how many of them are women? And these are the people who take decision about land allocation, about resources that are allocated by the state or the central government, who is utilizing them. So I think it's important that if we want to mainstream gender, then let's have men and women at every level of decision making. Let us equally prioritize men and women along the value chain. It is also important to note that when we talk about the private sector, and many times people think it's only the big people, the big farmers, oftentimes men, who are involved in mechanized farming. But the smallholder farmers are also, the majority of women smallholder farmers, they are private sector. Their challenge is that there is not much investment and they don't have much resources to make that private investment profitable. Can we invest in them? Can we make them to form very stronger cooperatives, that can be able to move processes? Sometimes their investment are seen as risky, and therefore banks, for instance, do not want to put money into smallholder agriculture where the women dominate. So can we create insurance schemes for these women? I mean, if you look at the impact of floods on populations now, I believe there's going to be much significant of women because their holdings are smaller, and their investment is also smaller, their savings are much smaller. When everything is wiped away, they have to start afresh. So we have to think along these lines if we really want to mainstream gender. The starting point being bring them on the table to be part of a planning, part of a decision making, and part of a prioritization.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Kingsley. Let's not lose sight of. You want to ask him?
I wanted to ask His Excellency a question, a follow-up to, but you have an announcement.
Yes, no, just to say that we really don't want to lose sight of today as World Food Day. We will, of course, be speaking to Mr. Kafere in a short while, of course, what today stands signifies. But let's go to Nasarawa, where, of course, we have His Excellency. Kingsley, ask a question, please.
Yeah, but Your Excellency, I just want to follow up on what Lansana was saying a while ago as to how to boost the productivity of smallholder farmers, in this case mostly women, and the hindrances that they tend to face. I know that some of these things, of course, are governed by our patrilineal societal governance systems. Let's say access to land, that's decisions around land allocation, implements and impulse. These are usually made by men, and women are in the periphery. Do we have any example as to how this has been altered and with positive results, or is this something that you may wish to consider on the basis of what you are hearing this morning?
Yeah, I think the presentation he made is quite in order and it is correct. But it is also, if you look at it based on who are there, I want you to look at it from the point of even take one agency, for instance, that is the Nigerian Sugar Development Council. They have a program where it says 30% of whatever the commercial producer is producing should be allocated to outgrowers. Now, it did not specify whether these outgrowers should be men or women. Now, because of the kind of culture we have here in the north, unless you come to places, again, like Nasarawa, where some other people are not that, if you go to the deep northern part of the country, how many men really will allow their women, without them being part of the project, to go and be outgrowers? is going to be very little because of the kind of culture, religion, and the rest of that. I think those are some of the hindrances that we are facing. So, but what we do here in Nasarawa State, we indicate that, whatever the percentage is going to be there, it is going to be for youth and women. That way we are removing some of the other those who have always enjoyed it out. So, and in most cases, we have seen a lot of returns, where you will see some of these young ladies, that will come and then they will take ownership of maybe one hectare of land, and then you give them the implements, you give them that. That's what Olam is practicing in Doma. And that is what also we are doing with the same Doma Dam, that we are having roughly 500 people who are going to be there. Now, I agree with him, we don't have 30% of that 500 that are women, but we have some women also that are coming up there. But in the past, you will have 0 women that will be part of that. So I think we have to look at it in totality. Our cultural background is a little bit different. Religion sometimes is a hindrance, to some of the other people, and things like that. So, but I think gradually we're beginning to see the change. Whether the change is up to the limit that we want to see, definitely not. But he made one point that I disagree with him a little bit. He said women are not in decision making. I have been in management now for roughly 30 years of my life, and in most of these other places that I have been, women are usually part and parcel of those decision making. I have worked with situations where the women are the company secretaries and they are the legal backing to make decisions.
All right, we seem to have lost connection there. Hopefully, if we do have time, we'll return to you to conclude. But SSG Niger, what do you have to say to that? And again, take this along with you. One of the key items in this year's World Food Day is how to sustain agricultural products. So I would like for you to also speak.
Well, thank you very much. Let me align the approach to participation of women, and youth in agriculture. We do know that, in the northern part of the country, 60% or more of agricultural activities are actually taken by women. Now, usually it's up the value chain. They may not be into direct production, but when you're talking of processing, commodity, marketing, and all of this, it's taken by women. So, of course, in terms of decision making, well, it depends on, which level you're talking about, within the value chain. However, in terms of ownership of productive assets, yes, that could be an area where, there is need, to expand, the scope for women. And I think I align completely with the UN Women, And, of course, in terms of sustaining, agricultural productivity, production, and of course, food security, we need to really look at two areas or three. One, these smallholder farmers should have access, to improve inputs, fertilizers, seedlings, whether it's for, fisheries or livestock and all of that. And I think that way, we can improve, the productivity, so that they can, over time, be able, to sustain their production and, of course, make more money, out of those investments. Two, of course, we need to bring in more of, these categories of people. Younger people need to go into agriculture. Women need to go more into agriculture, because today agriculture should be seen as a business rather than, the usual approach, to programming of the sector that we used to experience. And believe me, today, if you go to some of these communities in Niger, for instance, you see young people making money. I had a young person who goes into irrigation for rice. He makes an average of 10 million naira per year. And that is more than, enough to sustain him and to sustain, the sector. And if you have more of the younger people going into agriculture, I think that will be an element for sustainability. And lastly, of course, is the agricultural infrastructure. Now, we talk about, multiple cropping. You cannot do multiple cropping without good irrigation infrastructure. And I think this is where we need to focus on, so that at least, year in, year out, farmers, will continue to produce. And we believe that because of the growing population, we need to have an increase, the rate of agricultural production should actually be able to match our population. Otherwise, we might be resorting again back to importation. Today, we are happy that we are self-sufficient in rice production. We are nearly self-sufficient to maize and other related crops. And I think we need to interrogate this more so that we'll be able to increase the scope and sustain, the momentum in terms of production.
All right, thank you very much, Ahmed Matane, SSG Niger State. Let's bring in once again Mr. Fred Kafero of the FAO. Of course, this will be like your closing thoughts. As earlier you were talking about the theme for this year's World Food Day and the significance of the various items thereon. And so elaborate on that and tell us after the day, so what next?
Thank you so much. First and foremost, let me also echo what you said at the beginning, that this World Food Day also celebrates and recognizes what we call the food heroes. The food heroes are all these people that you are talking about who are involved in producing, in farming, in fishing, in distributing and making sure that we are fed. So we recognize that, and having heard from the SSG Niger State the importance of smallholders and the role they play is critical, not only here, in many countries. Quite often, we as FAO, we of course we support all forms of production, including large-scale responsible investments in agriculture. As smallholders, working with other UN entities, UN Women one of those, in terms of organizing them, because unless they are organized and are able to collectively work together on their small pieces of land collectively and cumulatively, it's difficult to improve technology. Yesterday we had a similar discussion where one of the women leaders was saying we are tired of this handhold. The handhold can't take us anywhere. And this is where the essence of collective action comes in, to be able to, manage that piece of land with new technology, because it's very difficult to have technology introduced on small scattered pieces of land. So our collective work in terms of supporting the efforts of the government as UN comes in here with my colleague of the UN Women who I've been talking about.
All right, Mr. Fred Kafero, rep of FAO, that's Food and Agriculture Organization, one of the agencies of the United Nations. We'd like to appreciate you for being part of our conversation this morning.
Thank you so much.
We also would like to thank the Secretary to the State Government of Niger, that's Ahmed Matane. We'd like to thank you. We're having you in our studios today for the first time. We used to take you from Mina during the COVID, at the peak of the COVID-19 issues. Yes. Thank you very much for being in our studios this morning.
Thank you once again.
We'd like to appreciate what Nigerians will call our regular customer, the DG of NISA, that is the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, Engineer Clement Nze. Thank you very much always for your insights on this very important issue. A deep thanks also to Abdullahi Abubakar, Director of Mechanization in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. Lansana Warner, who is UN Women Deputy Country Rep in Nigeria, we thank you for being around. And last but not the least, deep thanks to His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Nasarawa State, Engineer Abdullahi Sule. Your Excellency, we thank you very much for being part of our discussion this morning. Of course, we understand that there's a freeze on this Zoom connection to us from Lafia, that's the Nasarawa State capital. But regardless, Your Excellency, we appreciate you being part of our conversation and the insights that you also brought in today. Okay, so that does it for us on Good Morning Nigeria, not just for today, but indeed for the week. Wishing you a lovely weekend. Stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Claire Dilabo Abdul Razak. We do appreciate you as always. Do join us again same time next week. And don't forget, always wear a mask, observe physical distancing, and of course stand against rape and rapists.